Meeting will come to order, please.
Handle that, right?
The notice requirements of the Open Public Meeting Act for this meeting have been satisfied. Would you please take a second, turn off electronic equipment as we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Attention, salute. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I thought you were going to take a knee.
Call the roll, please.
Mayor Becker?
Here.
Commissioner Amadeo?
Here.
Commissioner Blumberg?
I am here.
Okay, we're going to start with department head reports, and we'll start with Chief Tabasso today.
Mayor, Commissioners, I'd just like to say we had a great fire prevention week. To recap all that we did at the schools and different places, it was very well attended, very well received, and just thank you for that opportunity. I have nothing else to report today.
Thank you, Chief. Johanna?
All is well in the clerk's office. We're working on our calendar for next year. If anyone has anything that needs to go on it, please let me know.
Thank you, Johanna. Mr. Abbott?
Mayor and Commissioners, you have two resolutions on for tonight's consideration. One which would authorize or allow you on behalf of the city to sign an agreement with the DEP regarding the stormwater management system to be constructed. And the second one really is a confirmation of a easement allowing the additional sand and the placement of the pipes that are proposed by the Army Corps of Engineers. It's a pretty complicated topic. Should we handle it this way? You ask me questions, or how would you like me to proceed?
Does anybody have any questions for the solicitor? Maureen, John? We're good.
Okay, now on the second item, you have a proposed ordinance amendment for the height of buildings. And I have done as I was instructed to make it for a 30-foot height limitation, but in discussion with various parties, including builders and architects, as well as our own personnel. As you know, when you consider an ordinance, a zoning ordinance, you introduce it, and then you send it down to your land use board, who they will debate it and study the merits of it. I would like to make a suggestion that you consider, instead of 30 foot, that it would be 32 foot, or maybe 31 foot. But 30, I am told the 32, there is some merit to it. It would allow more, perhaps more artistic design on the roof. Instead of being married to one pitch of 512, it gives these designers a little bit more ability to have different type of styles of roof. It also eliminates any question. I know, for instance, they're trying to get them up higher so they can park underneath with no problem. For instance, we have a duplex right down the street here. They can't park a big SUV under there. It's just a little bit too low. So it's got to be at least 30. It should be. I think the way of the world is showing you that buildings in barrier islands are going to be higher. And we may not like it. We don't like a lot of things, but with what's going on with flood elevation requirements and flood insurance requirements, higher is better. And I think you give them more leeway if you want. I'd like to see maybe the planning board really debate this or consider it. They've got builders, architects in there. But if you want to go with 30, that's your call. But I don't know if anybody else wants to comment on that one.
You're commenting, but how did you get to 30 in the first place? And I think the people that proposed 30 ought to be able to comment and
Yes.
say how we got to 30.
Okay.
Mayor, well, first off, it was a lengthy process when we started our master plan review, and that's back as far as Roger Rubin still being here. We had meetings with various stakeholders in the city of Margate, and amongst the architects and the builders and even the real estate agents throughout the city, this recommendation was put on the floor numerous times based on the fact that the restriction that we have, the ordinance that exists at the height of 28 foot, was pre-Sandy. And as we raised, according to FEMA, our base flood elevation, it became a very costly engineered form of being able to fit a house into a 28-foot height limit based on engineering the wood, that you would have to go to 2x6s and 2x8s for floor joists. And it became a concern for the builders and the architects that it not only added to the cost, it was almost, it was a very difficult task, because a lot of homes like to have a 9-foot ceiling height, at least on the first floor. So through the course of the discussions, one of the recommendations from the committee work was to revisit the 30-foot, and it still impedes issues. It doesn't make it free and clear. I think it's going to help alleviate some of the redundancy with requests for variances, but there's still going to be variances that are going to come before the board. I'm not opposed to it going in front of the board with their consideration to go to maybe 31 or 32 foot, but this was basically what was presented at the time. And I think what we should do is wait till we hear the discussions from the floor of the planning board and see what their concerns are and address it. And if they make the recommendation to change it, then I would be in favor of it.
Maury? I'm good with that also. Okay.
So you're saying go with it as is, 30 or 30?
As is.
Yeah, if there's going to be a change made, it should be the planning board making the change.
Yeah, but you can give them some guidance if you wanted to.
Well,
All right.
I think we have Roger McCartan with us, and he's on the planning board, so I think you can revisit it and see what the outcome is.
I can touch on it right now if you'd like. Basically, there's 3 height zones in the city of Margate, 2 30-foot zones and 1 28-foot zone. The idea is to allow 30 feet across the board. However, to go from 28 to 30 foot, they wanted some conditions where to reduce the mass, which was pretty much clear in the previous master plans. They wanted to keep that incorporated into the 30-foot height. So basically, you're giving them the 2 extra feet in the center, but holding down the hat on the side. The planning board was very clear about that. I don't think there's any movement to change that at this point in time. And to further on Scott's issue, I think we have to look at allowing garages and parking underneath homes. It's going to free up open space around the houses. Plus, the homeowner will benefit from a higher house because it'll be so much higher than base flood. It'll help Jimmy's job a little bit easier. And I think we got to look at how that 30-foot will affect the extra height with the garage too before we start jumping to 31 and 32. Although personally I agree that 31 and 32 feet is probably better. But at this point in time, I think we ought to stick with what we have because it does comply with the master plan.
Okay. Scott, do you have anything else?
No, that's it. Thanks.
Jim?
Year to date on demolition is 37, and the photographing of the property is saving some of the infrastructure, our curbs, our streets. I think this is the way. This is the new way we're going to start taking care of our city without the demolition crews destroying our curbs and our sidewalks and saying it wasn't our fault. That's why I report.
Thank you, Jim.
How do you control that further, Jim, just because I don't understand? In other words, I know you're taking a picture, but
They know we're taking the photos before they go onto the site with their tractor. So when they go onto the site and they disturb that area, then we note it right away and have them repair it. The contractor that does demolition or destruction of property. That's the only way we're going to save the city from getting destroyed.
I'm fine with that as long as you stay on it and as long as it works. I mean, I'm not looking for more legislation if we don't need it, but I want to make sure that with all the effort that we're putting into it to resolve the problem, I don't know what hammer we have over the contractor, because as a construction official, I'm not sure that you can hold up a permit. You can't hold, I don't believe, you're the person, but my question is, could you hold, what is your hammer, in a sense, because there's no money in escrow, or is there? And there's no permit that you can hold up, or is there, I guess? I don't wanna make a statement.
Okay, so the hammer is getting the permit in the first place. They will not get the permit to demo the structure until the photos have been taken. The second hammer is the certificate of approval after the demolition's been completed. We go and take a photo after the demolition. So we won't give them the certificate of approval, which they need to get paid by the owner of the property.
So that's a legal requirement.
Yes.
I wasn't aware of the certificate of approval
Right.
as an administrative tool.
Right.
But, okay.
John, I'm sorry.
Yes. And Rich's points are well taken, and I think we had this discussion before, but we've gotten off track a little bit. I requested Scott, and I know he's been busy, so we've laid down on this a little bit, but we do have to look at our ordinance and stiffen up our ordinance. We talked about, not a bond possibly, or some kind of physical demand to request until they got their CO, it would be released to them. So that's something that we do have to revisit, that ordinance, to look at it and make it firm so that we're protected.
All right, well, perhaps Jim and Roger can get together and make some joint recommendations. I can meet with them, and then we can go over it with Commissioner and the attorney, and we can get this thing done. Because I know Roger had some other recommendations from a planning standpoint that could help us.
And that's what I meant.
You okay?
Yes, sir.
You okay? Okay. Frank?
We've been very busy. We've been replacing fire hydrants in the utility department. We've been cleaning up a lot of city properties around town, including Ty Field and the ball field and other city properties. We're also finalizing our 2018 budget so we can have it ready and prepared for tomorrow. Other than that, we're very busy, and we're looking into the holiday season.
You okay?
Yeah.
Thank you, Frank.
All right.
Roger?
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. Just to reiterate on the height issue, I'd say we've probably had about at least 15 or 20 variances come in for height alone. So that further justifies this ordinance revision. Planning and zoning has been very, very busy with inspections and street openings. There's no end in sight, and that's good for Margate. That's it.
Thank you, Roger. Ed?
There's not a lot of activity construction-wise going on right now. We do have the tennis court. We've bids that we had rejected. We rebid them, see if they can come in a little bit below what they were before. That would put them below our estimate, and that hopefully will. I think we're receiving bids next week on that. And I have looked into, at the request of some residents previously, looked at some sound barrier material that could be installed on a cyclone fence near the pickleball courts. So I've located 2 manufacturers. I've contacted their reps. I've asked them if they have installations close enough for me to go look to try to help that problem at a relatively low cost.
Low cost would be good.
Yeah.
Anything else, Ed? Okay. Rich?
I don't want to jump the gun with the finance director. If she has anything, I'm not really sure. I hadn't conferred with her today, but I know the tax office is in the process of sending out the excess water bills for water, and because all the water meters were read, and then the excess bills go out at this time. The tax office is also in the process of holding the annual tax sale, which will be, I believe, the first week in December, and they'll be advertising over the next 4 weeks as required by law. The finance director has asked for budget submissions that are due tomorrow, as Frank mentioned, and we're in the process, or she is in the process, of formulating the preliminary operating budget going forward, and we'll be also working on a capital plan. Earlier this year, I'd asked for priorities, which were not necessarily capital priorities, but were inclusive of capital priorities from all the department heads and commissioners. So I remind you, as it relates specifically to capital and specifically the commissioners, because the department heads will be putting capital together from their departments, but if you have any generalized projects that you'd like to see funded that we're not aware of, please get the information to us ASAP, either directly to me or to Lisa or through your own department head that you work with. We're also working with negotiations for all of the labor organizations that we have in the community. And they're going along as expected at this point. Fire, police, and the Employee Association. We've held meetings with each of them. We are not at the point of resolving the contracts, but I'm confident that we will before the end of the year. That's all I have.
Rich, thank you. Chief Wilson.
We started prepping for the Atlantic City Marathon this weekend. As a reminder, Amherst Avenue, there's going to be some disruption for about 6 hours on Amherst between Monroe and Jerome. Actually, Monroe and Huntington. That's what I was saying, but like I said, 6 hours. And just to remind everybody, we worked out a great deal with the JCC on that regarding the barricade, so that was a win-win for us. Other than that, everything's great.
Thank you, Chief. Lisa?
Thank you. To add to what Rich was saying in regards to the budget, for the commissioners, not only if I would like you to include your capital budgetary requests for next year, but if there's anything in your operating budget that you foresee that if you want me to fund anything, special projects or things like that, please also keep that in mind. I know, like Mayor, you're communicating with the Green Team, on occasion, so if there's something that they're planning, just keep that in mind, so I make sure to have sufficient funding in your budget. Also, in addition to the capital, I was reviewing our prior authorizations to see what we can cancel before the end of the year. So I have a schedule prepared. I'm going to send it to Rich tomorrow for his review, and I'll ask that it be added to the next agenda. Right now, preliminarily, I'm looking to cancel about $500,000 in our general capital and just under $70,000 in the utility. The majority has been unfunded, so that's going to just reduce future taxation, but there is approximately $113,000 that will go into our capital surplus, which would help. So that hopefully will be on the next agenda. Two other things. I would like to thank Nanette for the great article that she wrote to follow up about the opioid abuse epidemic and efforts that Margate and Ventnor are taking to assist in that. So thank you, Nanette. And my last thing, I would just like to take a moment to acknowledge the passing of our longtime employee, Joan Richmond. Her services were held today. She was a 32-year employee. And I did attend the Mass as well as Commissioner Blumberg. I saw him there. And it's just worth noting, she served Margate for a very long time. And perhaps for consideration, you might want to acknowledge her in the calendar for next year. I know we've done that in the past for longtime employees who have passed away. That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Lisa. John?
Nothing, Mayor.
Maury?
Yes, I do. Thank you. So on the agenda, we have a resolution that will proposes to adopt a cooperation agreement for the drainage system on the beach. And I'd like to read a brief statement, and I want to thank, first and foremost, I want to thank Business Administrator Deeney for helping me prepare this statement in detail. And so if you'll bear with me, I will read this. I expect we are voting yes today on the resolution to support the agreement with the State of New Jersey DEP. but I am voting in the affirmative with some reluctance. On balance, the agreement represents a positive result for the people of Margate, given where we are today. In my view, we should not have been forced into this agreement because the predictable and inexcusable design mistakes of the Army Corps of Engineers. My reluctance is based primarily on my concern that some year in the future, Margate will be faced with the choice of undertaking another replenishment because parts of our beaches will have been washed away and we will not be allowed to destroy the dunes. There will be no place to sit on some blocks. It is true that the agreement does not require us to participate in any future replenishment project, which all three commissioners stood firm on, but I am concerned that we will be passing on the decision to future boards of commissioners. I know how hard the commissioners and our attorneys worked over many months on negotiations to get the wording that we have achieved into this agreement. I also know and appreciate that many of our Margate citizens supported us, knowing that we were appalled as a community that we had to fight our government in court on so many occasions. This agreement is not perfect, but we achieved our main objectives. Number one, there is no requirement that Margate participate in a renourishment project in the future. Two, there are no capital costs for drainage construction on the beach, which will total millions of dollars. Three, Margate street drainage will be immensely improved with no capital costs to Margate taxpayers. Four, this agreement will allow the project to move forward to completion without further litigation. Five, we believe we have reestablished a working relationship with the New Jersey DEP, which will be an important partnership after the Army Corps moves out of our region. And so again, so there's no mistake. My main concern is that in a year or 2 years, when the sand that they've pumped washes away, that there'll be beaches probably between Lancaster and Rumson where we will have very little room to sit. We won't be allowed to sit on the dunes. The agreement does not allow us to bulldoze down the dunes. In that regard, we will be forced to pump additional sand if we want to have a recreational beach there. And the state doesn't believe that they're going to have to pay for that. So that money will probably be borne by the Margate taxpayers. And so that in fact is and remains my major concern. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Marty. Well, I had prepared a short statement which I was going to read before I vote. I will, Marty set the tone. I will give, if you give me 30 seconds, I will read mine. Let's be clear on one thing, that from day one, none of us really wanted dunes. We're talking today about a citywide drainage system paid for by the Corps of Engineers. This is a direct result of our lawsuits in both federal and superior courts. I've talked to engineers, I've talked to scientists, and all believe that this system will work as designed. It should relieve us of drainage problems on both the beach and our street ends. Is this agreement perfect? No, it's not. But we are getting a multi-million-dollar drainage system at no cost to the city. This agreement is a result of lengthy negotiations with the DEP and the Corps of Engineers. My personal thanks to Mr. Abbott and Commissioner Amadeo for their very hard work. It is my belief that we do have a workable agreement, and therefore I will vote yes when that comes up. Is there, you want to say anything?
When you're done.
I'm done.
Thank you, Mayor. I thought we were reserving it for the 5 o'clock
So did I.
minute hour. But no, you didn't. Listen, we work as a team here, and this has been an extremely difficult time for the city of Margate with the situation we were faced of. And I feel that as difficult as it was to deal with the Army Corps and negotiate with the New Jersey DEP, as Solicitor Abbott would attest, we came out in general for the good of the whole town, all 40 streets having a drainage system. Are we happy? No. We're all in the same boat. But this is a solution to a problem that we faced for over 50 years that was exasperated by the design of the Army Corps, and we're left with what we have. So I believe it's not a perfect document, but I believe the document protects the people of Margate, and I believe that we can work off of it, and I believe that we built through our many, many hours of meetings with the DEP, I believe we build a relationship that we can depend on in the future if we do face issues, as we're all aware we're going to. So again, it's a difficult time, but I think the time's right and we have to progress, because my biggest goal is to preserve the summer season of 2018.
Thank you, John. Anybody else? We will now open for public comment on anything that was discussed here today. We have 3 minutes, and it will be a strict 3 minutes.
Stephen Altman, 9003 Amherst Avenue, Margate. If I may, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to ask Mr. Blumberg if there is a width, a minimum width to beaches, should we have storms that wash sand away, is there a minimum width to the beaches that you have in mind that would trigger needing to refill?
Well, I'll answer you that I don't know the answer to that question. I think the public will determine that for us, this minimum width. If you can only fit 3 people between the water and the dune, that might not be acceptable. So I expect those folks will be in here yelling at somebody. Whether it's me or Mike or John, I don't know.
It'll be a yelling factor to determine that it's time for Margate to pump sand. Okay, thank you.
You'll know it when you see it.
Yeah, right.
It'll be Scott's wife.
Sewell, 22 West Drive, following up on the remarks of Commissioner Blumberg, I think the record should be set straight that the mayor and his running mate, Taube, held positions that were detrimental and diametrically opposed to the majority of Margate voters. Taube was gung-ho for those greeny domes, and the mayor, as usual, was vacillating, procrastinating, and quote-unquote undecided. And this indecision cost the taxpayers mightily, because that was a window of opportunity to talk to the big Bambino up in Trenton. And to lose that opportunity was really, really a disaster in the making. But more importantly, down the road, you 3 gentlemen can pat yourself on the back that you cut the best deal you could under adverse conditions. But I'm not talking about adversity. I'm talking about being proactive. Proactive. Get on the stick right now, yesterday, and get the Army Corps of Engineers to put that master jetty up at the end of Longport. Then you don't have to worry about spending tens of millions of dollars of Margate taxpayer money to replenish the beaches. This is the logical, rational approach. Now, if you want to sit on your hands, sit on your brains, go ahead and do it. But you're not doing Margate taxpayers and residents an iota of a favor. Get on it now. Get on the Acela. Get down and talk to Menendez. Get down and talk with Cory Booker, Frank Lobiondo, and get them on this project. Because not only that, Scotty's little pet dredging of the lagoons also is contingent upon that master jetty. Because if the Egg Harbor Inlet silts over and nobody can get out, what's the purpose of dredging the lagoons? Makes no sense at all. So let's use logic for a change. And let's not vacillate like the mayor did for so long, or perhaps follow the Taulby role of being pro-dune. Let's get pro-master jetty. And right now, you never know, somebody might need a favor and be very glad to throw you that bone. But unless you explore it, you're never going to find out for sure. Now is the time to begin to explore it. Now is the time to make the initiatives. Keep the last 12 seconds, Mayor.
Hey guys, Dan Gottlieb, 407 North Nassau. Just a question for you guys. The agreement, Maury, I was confused by something you said at the end. Is there, there's no requirement to renourish, but if we decide we need renourishment, could you explain how the cost share, if there will be a cost share, how that will work?
You know the numbers?
So I believe at that time, we would have to enter into a state aid agreement.
Correct.
So, which would then be the same state aid agreement that's out there now with the percentages for, that you guys have been talking about, that everybody's been talking about.
65, 25,
8%
10
for us.
approximately.
75 federal, 65.
65 federal, 35%
35
state, of which we bear 10% of.
If the money is
Or-
available.
20%, 25% of, I'm sorry.
Dan, it's easier, our local cost.
It's 65, 35, 10 approximately, correct?
8.75.
Yeah, approximately, right.
Again, if the money is available, if there's federal and state money at the time.
Right. So at the current structure of whatever this agreement says, if we lose our recreational beach, which I believe we will, especially on those blocks you outlined, currently there's nothing in place that provides money from the state or the federal government.
Unless it's a major storm, it's declared a state
But he said-
emergency
he
by the
said now,
president.
Yeah,
Right.
there's really nothing now.
Nothing there.
Nothing now. And if we go to them and say, okay, we'll sign the state aid agreement, there's no guarantee that the money will be there to subsidize our share of that.
That is correct.
Okay. I'm just going to go on the record with my remaining 55 seconds of saying that I do understand the necessary evil, if you were, to enter into all this, and I appreciate everything you guys did to try to make it as painless as possible. I think the drainage situation, they're fixing a problem that I don't really think we ever had before. I think our drainage system may have been rudimentary and old, but it worked very well. And my big concern is the loss of recreational beach, and that the design of the project has changed now with the drainage system as opposed to the system that was in place. And I'm just wondering, and I think Glenn will speak to this, does that design change, when you build a car, you think of how you're going to build the exhaust system.
Thank you, Dan.
Okay, I'm just going to say that they made a lot of changes to the project that have changed the way the project should have been built in the first place. I'll let Glenn finish that up.
Thanks, Dan.
Good afternoon, Glenn Klotz, 118 North Barclay Avenue. I just wanted to speak to what Dan said. I said this last time, I just want to go on the record again about it, that the design was changed. Those of us that saw the 2000 design, okay, it's not the same design. Why? Because they weren't going to put in this is why I think, because they did not plan this time to put in any outfalls. And so they went with a different plan to do a wider beach. But unfortunately, we all know that didn't work. Okay, so then they went back to the original plan with outfalls and street end drainage. We all agree necessary evil at this point. However, they haven't changed the plan that they decided to go with without the drainage. So now we have the berm part of the plan pushed towards the ocean, which increases the chance that we're going to lose face beach, beach in front of the berm. I think it almost guarantees it in some areas. And I'm just curious, you know, shouldn't we be talking to that with them? I mean, I don't see where that is a major alteration in their plan, unless it would have to be renegotiated in a contract with Weeks Marine, of course, which would then hold up the whole thing. And I don't think anybody wants this going into. So, however, it would seem to me if they went back to the original plan, if they can, it would mitigate to some degrees the loss of the face beach, because we have, you know, at least I live down on Barclay Avenue. There's a lot of that dry beach now. It's buried behind the project. And I don't think in the original plan that was meant to be the case. And I see them now, they're down where it's Sumner, I think. Okay. There's still a chance, you know, for them to angle that thing into the bulkhead and not have in the other 40% of the town that problem. I just think now they're going down the middle of the beach. And I don't think that was the original plan. And I'm wondering if we can discuss that with them at this point, if they would even hear our concerns. And that, of course, goes forward to replenishment. If you're further back, you're going to have less of a chance that you're going to need that. That's all I had to say.
Thank you for your comments, Glenn. Any other public comment?
Steve Warner, 103 North Sumner Avenue. I don't know that it would be a bad idea to check out that master jetty, what it actually accomplished. It seems to me that, you know, they did it in Brigantine and the beaches all became huge. Maybe that would be the solution to the problem, possibly. It's certainly worth checking out. So I'm going to have to go ahead and agree with John on that one, that it might be a good idea. This is the time, and see if we can get the government to kick in some money. And maybe that would solve all the problems. We wouldn't need any more dredging or anything. I don't know. It's possible that's what happened in Brigantine. I don't know. But it's certainly worth checking out. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Any other comment? You want a double header today?
If I have your permission, sir.
We'll take a vote and let you know 9 o'clock. No, please go ahead. Your name and address again for record.
Steve Altman, 9003 Amherst Avenue. It was my understanding that the Army Corps of Engineers, when the master bulkhead idea was brought up at one of the meetings, that they absolutely refused the idea in that meeting. Am I remembering correctly?
You are correct.
Okay, so my understanding was at that meeting that it would just kick the can down south of here to Ocean City and so on with master jetties, that would rob Peter to pay Paul, as it were. Wasn't that the idea, sir?
I don't remember that, but I remember the meeting. And if you remember, at the time they handed out a pamphlet.
Right.
Of all the types of beach protection they considered. And master jetty was the number one under consideration, and they let it go because it was way too expensive. That
Way
was
too
yeah,
expensitive.
That is correct.
Okay. I thought that was the fact that it would rob Peter to pay Paul.
That's what they said that night, if you remember.
Okay. Yeah, I do.
They weigh 63
Thank
million.
you.
Yeah, that's too expensive.
Well, that's big government, big brother. Any other comment? Is there a motion to close public comment?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Mayor Becker?
Yes.
Commissioner Amadeo?
Yes.
Commissioner Blumberg?
Yes,
A motion to adjourn this meeting, please.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Mayor Becker?
Yes.
Commissioner Amadeo?
Yes.
Commissioner Blumberg?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you all. We'll be reconvening in 5 minutes.
The trees are going to be planted on Saturday.